promise that I have something that will take the mainstream history that we have been force-fed since day one and rip it right in half. So here we go. The photo description states that in the summer of 1903, construction continues inside the entrance to the Palace of Machinery for the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, the 1904 World's Fair. The date of this photo is in 1903. The fair in St. Louis was in 1904. So this would all make perfect sense, except there's a massive flaw. A flaw so big that it's undeniable proof that this building was constructed 100 years before the 1903 date that we are told, and proof that there was a mud flood that ripped through this building at some point after 1803. Where is the foundation of this building? Incredibly detailed construction projects do not take place on top of dirt and garbage. This, in my opinion, is the most incredible photo that I have ever seen to this point. A lie right in our faces, saying that this was being built in 1903, when we have multiple dates of 1803, time-stamped right on the building. Multiple times. Not only that, but you can see that the mud flood damaged the bottom of this building here. The mud came after the construction, not before. And I want to make that point very clear. This is a cleanup project, 100%. After this World's Fair, they knocked these buildings down, not because they were pathetic, but because they held dates that do not fit in our mainstream timeline and architecture that we cannot reproduce today. It's incredible. I've been talking to many people, engineers, construction workers, architects, and more about this photo. They are telling me that this is undeniable proof, and at this point, there isn't an excuse in the book that could save the mainstream history. It's time for everyone to wake up to the nonsense that we have all been force-fed to believe. There are a lot of hidden photos that I'm about to share, and they no longer have to be buried deep in the archives. And for the beginning of these photos, I want to focus on the main theme. The theme being that the building is completed, and they are simply putting scaffolding around the buildings. In my opinion, they are painting these buildings white so that they look brand new, when in reality, they are old and from the past civilization. Here we are told is the government building in the Philippine Exposition. We can zoom in on these guys, and of course they're not doing anything productive. You would think that they could build a better ladder compared to what they supposedly built right next to them. And again, let's switch over to this one, where we are told that this is a construction photo when it's clearly completed. The only construction going on here is the scaffolding. Again and again. People just standing there looking so odd. And it almost looks like they just have a kid here. I mean, look at the detail on top of the columns. It's unbelievable. And I believe that I was correct when I said that they were just painting these buildings. They are not constructing anything. Now let's look down here at the bottom right hand side of this photo. It says right here that these are painters and decorators. They are not building anything like the description says for these photos. And they needed a place to live on site because they were painting all of these old world buildings. They were going to be there for a while. The buildings lasted forever. The paint did not. So they needed to get a fresh coat of paint on there. But when you look at the description of the photo, it says that it's a photo during its construction. So they are clearly lying. Painting is not constructing. It's painting. Two different, completely separate jobs. So these are all from the St. Louis World's Fair that we showed in the intro. The dates are from 1803, not 1903. And it had a mud flood that ripped through the interior of these buildings. So let's take a look at this building from St. Louis. And this is founded and renamed the Varied Industries Building. This is another completion photo that they're trying to say is a construction photo. And I want to zoom in on the top of this building. Can you believe the tech that is on the top of this thing? It's incredible. We have shown the airships in episode 48 and how they connected these flying crafts to the top of these buildings and used them as charging docks. And to be clear, I don't think that the past civilization was limited to just these airships that we have photos of. I think that they had much more powerful vehicles. But let's get back to these photos. Skeptics have said these buildings were just made of wood and very easily constructed, and then that's why they knocked them down. No. The only wood that was being used in this project is for the scaffolding to paint the old world buildings white. The lumber is for the scaffolding, not the actual building. Let's make that very clear. If you've ever gone to one of these buildings, the pillars are pure marble. They're not wood. You can use the Field Museum as an example, located in Chicago. And now here we have another incredible construction photo, where for some reason, there isn't much construction going on, just a building with more scaffolding. So my question is, how have they gotten away with this nonsense for so long? That is not construction. I can clearly see that the building is done. Just because someone put a ladder in front of it doesn't mean this is being constructed. This is the process that painters use. Any painter will confirm this. And also imagine carrying these materials up that scaffolding. If this was really a construction photo, it would be impossible and very embarrassing because nobody would be able to do it. Does anyone see a crane anywhere? No. Once you know, you know. You don't go back to believing in the lies because they are ridiculous. We have more tech in the background here. There are two of them actually. And here we have a bunch of people that found this building. Let's take a second and look at the size of this thing. This was the Palace of Electricity. Could you imagine this being constructed today? This thing is unbelievable. And remember, there were so many of these buildings being thrown together in like 2 years supposedly, at the same exact time. Oh, and they are all dated 1803, not 1903. And what happened to the Palace of Electricity? We were told that these buildings were practically worthless, and they ended up in dump sites because they were just made of wood, right? The problem with that is that they are contradicting themselves. The Missouri History Museum states that the construction for the Palace of Electricity and Machinery costed them $412,000, which is the equivalent to $11.48 million today in 2023. So it's practically worthless, or is it 11.4 million? This is the kind of stuff that makes me fully trust the mainstream narrative. I love just knowing deep down that they would never lie to us. It's just really nice to know. I love that they provide us with full logistical details. They never contradict themselves. They go that extra mile to make sure that what we are being told is exactly what happened. Oh, they don't do any of that? No, they don't do any of that. Literally none of it. The title states that this is the Iowa State Pavilion construction. And if you just shut your eyes right now, you can clearly see them right there laying the cornerstone. Okay, you can open your eyes now. This is the master builder down here. And those guys up there were also fully trained on how to build massive palaces. In fact, they are admittedly self-trained, getting a lot of their architecture designs and ideas from working on Abe Lincoln's house. As you can see, they were very busy workers. They got that building done in less than 2 years, ready for the world to see. Temporarily, of course, before knocking it down, so that nobody would ever see it again. And we can't forget to mention that they have painters actually painting this building. 4 of them to be exact. Proving again that these are not construction photos. They are painting photos. And over on the right-hand side of this photo, we can clearly see a construction process happening, putting the scaffolding together with perfection. Just look at that scaffolding architecture. Okay, I'll be done with the sarcasm for today. The mainstream narrative is so ridiculous. It's really hard to not make fun of it at this point. And then we have more painters. He's got his paintbrush in his hand and the paint right there on the scaffolding. So it's pretty clear at this point that these are no longer allowed to be considered construction photos for anyone that ever had a doubt in their mind. Now he's holding up a hat, and that hat says something on it. I wish I knew what it said. Comment below what you think that hat says. All answers are accepted. The guy next to him is also wearing a top hat, which is, of course, if you're going for the productive painter / I still want my style points look, very common for the 1900s. Very impressive. And here we have the United States Fisheries Building during its completion. But I'm going to zoom in on this building on the right-hand side because it's very strange. And we have these creatures' faces on the side of this building, with writing here as well. I can't see exactly what it says, but it definitely doesn't say Fisheries Building. And then we can see more painters up here on the left-hand side. And here we have a modern fisheries building. Built by us, of course, which won't last forever, unfortunately, because that's the way we construct things. So here we have a fisheries building that is designed by the Greek gods. And we are told that this is a separation of 100 years. But we are evolving and advancing, when in all honesty, that's the complete opposite. More and more people are realizing that the mainstream history that is written down by some random individual that was never even there and is being told what to write is a joke. Anyone that is seriously backing the regurgitated nonsense at this point and is serious about it should be very careful what they hope and believe in, because I have a lot more on the way that is going to rip their history books apart. So let's switch gears here for part 2. I want to show you all the Grimes County Courthouse, located in Anderson, Texas. And we'll just go right in on their website and can really understand how deep the lie goes and how many times it's happened and how these stories are a code, and in my opinion, written by the AI. And a clear giveaway is the repetition. The courthouse was supposedly designed by Glover and Company and completed in 1894, where it incorporates the east wall and foundations of an earlier courthouse that was, you guessed it, destroyed by a fire. So, we are all aware of what the fire narrative really means at this point. It is a nod to their group that this building is from the old world. There was never a fire here, and this building is the original building. The fires that happen today are real. You can see them. The fires are there to destroy the previous civilization's work. And they are not just fires. In my opinion, they are demolitions. Stone and brick do not burn down from a house fire. And this is common knowledge. The fire story today is to destroy these buildings, collect the insurance check, and there's nobody to blame, conveniently. Now, a fire story from the 1800s is weird because they're trying to fit these incredible buildings into this insane timeline that they're trying to come up with. It's simply a nod, and we know this now. The amount of times that the fire narrative is given to us is alarming. Can you imagine every single house in your neighborhood going up in a fire? No, that's not possible. But nearly every single old world building has a fire story. The probability of that is 0%. So let's stay in Anderson County, Texas, where they have another courthouse that has a backstory that, in my opinion, wouldn't hold up in their own courthouse. Located at One Public Square in Palestine, Anderson County, Texas. This building was built on top of the highest hill in Palestine. And we all know when there is a big hill that something is most likely under the grass. We've shown this a lot. Episode 45 has an awesome example of this. Of course, we get the weirdest reoccurring names here, which we have shown a lot. How the AI can't come up with different names. It basically takes like 3 names and scrambles them. It's actually bizarre. It's very weird. Episode 43 is my favorite example of this with the Fredericks. But here we get the architects, Charles Henry Page and Louis Charles Page. So we get Charles Page and Louis Charles Page. That's fine, they can be brothers. But we know the reoccurring names at this point and know that this is not an accident. And we know what's really going on here. The mom and dad didn't put Charles as the one kid's name and Charles for the other kid's middle name. It's a clear mix-up by the AI. And then calling them brothers. And to drive this home, if you're on the fence, this is the 4th courthouse on this site. And this one was thrown together by the Charles Page twins in less than a year, over 110 years ago, from 1913 to 1914. Still trusting the narrative? Or should we go deeper? The first Anderson County Courthouse, a 1-story frame structure, was built in 1847. It was replaced, supposedly, 9 years later. And this type of thing was simple in the 1800s. Building courthouses back then with a horse and a wagon with no power tools was simple stuff. It was very easy. So a 3rd courthouse, also brick, was completed in 1886, only 30 years later. But you guessed it, was, of course, destroyed by a fire in 1913. We're clearly at the point where we are proving time and time again that we have been told a massive lie and that none of the mainstream history is or ever has been telling the truth. Again, using facts and real logistics and common sense. This fire supposedly happens in 1913. This is what they're telling us. And then somehow clean this brick building up, get it out of the way, get all of the new materials to the site, and knock this new courthouse out in less than a year. And it's here forever. This is insane to believe at this point. That isn't even close to a real timeline. And we're not done with Texas today. Let's go over to the Fort Bend County Courthouse and see what they have going on over there. Since, of course, we have these very real twin Charles Page brothers, pinned as the architects of that one too. A brick, classical revival style masterpiece that also stands the test of time. And if you thought that last one was an eye-opener, hold on to your seats, because this is the 5th courthouse in this county, which began in 1837. The structure was designed by these Page twins and all wrapped up in 1909. So from 1908 to 1909, Less than a year, they got this thing done. And that's, of course, not the weirdest part. Because, of course, there is more. Because we need to figure out why there's been 5 courthouses here in this town. So the 1887 courthouse, one of the 5 that were here prior, had a clock tower, but they removed that shortly after the building was done. Which makes sense, if you're trying to hide the past civilization's work. This courthouse stood on Morton Street, where the current town hall sits, and you guessed it again, it burned down in 1930. Did you think that was where I was gonna stop? Well, here on TexasCourthouses.com, I found all 5 of these supposed previous courthouses, and I want to know where they all went. Not just one of them. The first one, in 1842, gone, lost to erosion. Here's a second one. Building completion date, 1871. Present status, gone, burned down in 1887. So we know that this exact same courthouse has multiple fire stories, because we already know that courthouse number 3, built in 1887, also burned down in 1930 from a fire. Oh, and remember when we were told that the clock tower was removed shortly after the building was done? Well, now we're being told that it was conveniently blown away in the wind. Come on, narrator, get your story straight. Oh, and just for fun, courthouse number 2 was $7,500. So courthouse number 4, just throw another 0 on the end of the same exact repeating number of 75. Unbelievable stuff. Between building projects that take less than a year, over and over, to the same names, and all of the old world buildings, somehow, randomly, without any backstory as to how it happened, going up in flames. Brick buildings, when we know that brick does not burn down from house fires. This is a lie, and has been right in our faces. And all we had to do was look. I have located these Charles Page twins, and I have found their supposed backstory. And not only are they from St. Louis, a place that we have gone to, and we know how incredible that place is now, but their father has the same name of Charles Henry, and the mother's name is Page. All 4 characters sharing the same name, where his father was a Mason, with his brother being named Louis, and another duplicate name, hinting at the city of St. Louis. It's a code, a clear connection, reoccurring names over and over again. A code for only their group to understand. Until now. Today, I'm going to introduce an alternative conclusion as to why these palaces are all over the world today. I'm going to attempt to take our thought process a little deeper. And we're also going to see a palace in Russia that we are told has a painter that died years before the construction was even close to being done. Because we all paint our house before it's built. No. Right here on stpetersburg.com, we are given a panoramic shot of St. Petersburg, Russia, with perfect dirt roads where I don't see a single person. Massive buildings everywhere, yet not one person. These photos are from 1861, only 3 years after they say that this was constructed. You can see this palace in the 4th shot in the panoramic view, where it's becoming clearer and clearer that these cities all over the world, palaces, were constructed by a massive civilization, one that was here before us, a civilization that had incredible technology, and a civilization that was here only a few hundred years ago, a civilization that is clearly being hidden to us. Yet their construction sits here looking at us straight in the face. These photos are alarming in my opinion. Everyone should be asking questions at this point. One question should be, who paved all of this dirt? Like it's all perfectly prepared for these photos. And I'm going to suggest an alternative, much less likely idea, an idea that should just be out there for people to think about. And possibly not just an alternative idea, but something that could definitely be an addition to what we have already known. That there was a previous civilization here before us. But after doing countless hours of this research on this topic, after looking at these photos, where these cities look like they were on display for all of us, almost like they were prepared for us, cleaned up perfectly, and ready for us all to come into the picture in the late 1700s. An idea that I'm just going to throw out there into the world for everyone to think about, instead of being just stuck in my head, is, are there 2 groups? One, that actually cared about us, possibly created us, and set this stage for us, and one that does not care about us, with the corrupt group still being here, and the other group that built our incredible stage and felt that we deserved the greatest palaces to live in and use. The group that fully understood this type of incredible construction, possibly no longer here, with a corrupt group that ended up wanting to control an entire population, us. Changing the narrative to all of these buildings, hijacking all of the buildings, calling them Capitol buildings, banks. Buildings for them now, and no longer for us. Buildings that were always and originally meant for us, where they are now used as this group's offices to control us. Destroying the rest of the buildings with wars, great fires that weren't so great, tricking us for 200 plus years, giving us a ridiculous story that a group of people that had a population of basically nobody, that rode around on donkeys with no technology, were the master builders of stone-carved and marble basilicas that stand the test of time all over the world, when in reality it was a much more powerful group that is no longer here, or maybe they are, and watching from a distance. A group that set the stage for all of us, built all of these incredible buildings that we have been talking about this entire time. Temples, cathedrals, basilicas, Capitol buildings, houses that are white, and no, not the vinyl siding ones. Is it possible that we are so much more important, so much more powerful than we are told, and completely tricked and manipulated into thinking that we are just these lazy pawns to these corrupt individuals that stole our buildings, our land, our lives, making us feel like we're born just to work and sleep, just to struggle over and over, when in reality, our lives are so much more important and incredibly valuable. In reality, they have stolen our buildings, taken them from us, and giving us these depressing, ugly boxes in return, which are demoralizing to look at. We know that the historical narrative that we are currently given is complete nonsense. We have proven this, in my opinion. We have shown massive flaws, including the population lie, where supposedly we are being told that nobody wants to have kids with anyone for thousands of years. And then in the 1700s, out of nowhere, conveniently, right when all the financial institutions begin, the human mind changes for the first time ever. Just a random fluke, we are told. And people finally enjoy each other's company and finally want to have kids with each other. And this narrative was accepted for far too long. Believing this narrative, this chart, is borderline insanity. What we don't know, and what we all want to know, is where we are. What is the truth? Who actually built these buildings? They are incredible, and nothing like the buildings that we build today. It's built by a different mindset. They're built with much more technology, much more information that we do not have. We are not taught these skills in our highest architecture classes. Which class shows us how to knock out a palace in a year with no power tools, no light bulbs, no shipping companies, nothing? That chapter was left out of the college architecture book. We all know this. These buildings that we all see in every single one of our cities, they tell a much different story than what we've all been told by the mainstream narrative. And this narrative, this lie, it only helps one group, and the group is not us. There was a previous civilization that was here before us, a civilization that was massive and held incredible technology. But there is a very real possibility in my mind that there are also higher powers that are possibly still here that set this current stage for us, and the game has now been corrupted. We don't advance our overall thought process by simply being quiet. Who maintained all of this dirt? We're being told that a civilization of no people had the capabilities to construct an entire palace city. And this city will last forever. Yet when you look at the finished product, there isn't a single person anywhere. It's empty. And here we have St. Isaac's Cathedral, located in St. Petersburg, Russia. And the inside just blows your mind, with massive doors, incredible detail, with a height of over 330 feet. And we are told the exact same story that we've seen all over the world, that this wasn't even the first structure. This one was the replacement. In fact, it was the fourth consecutive church standing at this place. The exact same location has had 4 churches here. This is what we're being told. I'm shocked that this pattern, that 4 buildings have been on the same site. How has this pattern not been identified before? We see the exact same thing, even over in Texas, when they have 7 courthouses on the exact same site. We've seen it all over. It's a repeating pattern. All of these narratives all over the world are, in my opinion, created by the same source. And in my opinion, based on everything that we've seen, it's an AI, very similar to ChatGPT. This palace has bronze doors, internal columns, statues on the inside, and of course, the interior was originally decorated with paintings that have been since painted over. And supposedly they reproduced them. They had to get rid of the originals because they deteriorated because of the cold and damp conditions inside. This is incredible how they get away with destroying the originals over and over. We are told that this building was constructed between 1818 and 1858. When we can easily catch this narrative in a lie, when we go to Vatican City and take a look at Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo painted this in 1508 to 1512, supposedly, predating this Russian painting by over 300 years. And it's holding up just fine, unless, of course, Michelangelo had a better paint set. It's ridiculous. So the paintings should have been just fine in Russia. And this is when the story gets even weirder, when they tell us that during World War II, the dome was also painted over, making it gray to avoid attention from enemy aircraft. So I hope we're all seeing very clearly at this point what these wars, seeing what their true purpose was. Clearly destroying these buildings, removing the inside because it was too cold. Give me a break. And they say the work was never completed. But when you take a look at the inside, it looks pretty completed to me. It doesn't even look like they missed one spot. And they tell us that the original paintings were done by this Karl guy and other random Russian masters of the day. And of course, no need to name these Russian masters of the day, but here is Karl. It was the pose of the day. Could you imagine if we gave information the way the mainstream narrative did? Just saying they were the flavor of the day, painted by the painters of the day, like it's some sort of special on the menu. It's incredible how this was accepted as fact for so long. It's shocking. And Karl died before the construction was done. Do we all paint our houses before the construction is done? Or is this the last step in the process? It is the last step. You don't paint your house years before it's done. He died in 1852. We are told that the building is done in 1858. So this guy that put the finishing touches on the palace is dead 6 years before the building is done. So we know we don't paint our house 6 years before it's done. Oh, and if we go down here at the bottom, we can see that this was his self-portrait. Very nice choice, Karl. Let's take a look at the technologies of this palace, where William Handyside is the engineer. So Handyside is the guy where they get 10,000 tree trunks and throw them into the marshy banks. So they want us to believe that there's just a bunch of tree trunks under this palace. And I know they are a bunch of liars at this point. So when we see something like this, I know to go deeper. This statement makes me think that there is something under this palace that has significant value. When we can see that this building has artwork and exhibits from a museum that were hidden away in the cathedral's basement. So now we know that this palace has a basement with valuables in it, and all chalked up to this war again. So they lay down these 10,000 tree trunks on a marshy bank, and then knock out a massive basement on top of all that, and then build a palace, and paint it before it's done, and then get rid of those paintings because it's a little too cold, but never finish those paintings, of course. Oh. And this is the 4th palace on the same site. It sounds like a lie. I wonder how much bigger this palace is underground, like we have seen in episode 44, when we caught a tunnel on camera from the Illinois State Capitol building while they were in the middle of destroying something and just call it a renovation project. So here's the construction photo that they give us. A photo from expresstorussia.com. There's a big problem though with this picture. It's a drawing. And we know that they had cameras in 1816, so why give us a drawing? I've said this before, but it's so true. For all we know, they just drew this last night. It's a drawing. It's obviously not proof of construction, not even close. Here we are told we have a view of the cathedral surrounded by wood scaffolding from another drawing, drawn 3 years ago by a master drawer of the day, as the mainstream narrative likes to say. It's incredible. So in 1931, they turned this cathedral into a museum when, under the Soviet government, the building was stripped of religious trappings. In 1931, it was turned into the Museum of the History of Religion and Atheism. So the complete opposite of a cathedral. Going back to my suggestion that there's possibly a group that wants to take these buildings that were originally meant for us in a positive manner and turn them into the complete opposite, removing everything that was once given to all of us, a cathedral, changed to a museum of history and atheism, where the original dove structure was removed and replaced by a Foucault pendulum, which we all know at this point is some weird symbol for this group. Let's check this palace out, now that we know that this building's narrative is forever in shreds. So here we have the St. Isaac's Cathedral, and right over here we have another building that'll no longer be hidden in plain sight, the Mariinsky Palace. Now let's have some fun, and make sure you don't confuse it with the theater. And thank you for letting us know about this masterpiece. Is there a more entertaining topic? Finding buildings, palaces, that make no sense in the fabricated timeline that we're given. Palaces that we can actually go and visit, especially when we're told that this was built in a year. And unfortunately, the original building was destroyed by a fire in 1859. Adding to our fire total. Is your mind blown yet? Should we go deeper? The new one, the one that's here today, the palace opened up the very next year. So the theater's narrative is clearly a mess. So let's go back to this palace, where in 1839, they were building palaces as wedding presents. This is incredible. Built in 5 years, from 1839, and wrapped it right up in 1844. And then, of course, taken over by the Russian government and off limits to the public. Were these buildings built for them? It's definitely an interesting thought that these narratives are thrown together by this group as a successful attempt to steal these buildings from us and clearly getting away with it, and then create the passport so that if we want to go visit these lands that were once all ours, you need to make sure you have your papers. I don't think this was the world that was created for all of us. I think it was the complete opposite. And it's been 100% infiltrated worldwide. And it's beginning to feel more and more like everyone's starting to realize that. And I was looking at this area and saw these two buildings in the background that clearly look out of place. So let's check this one out first. A building that was taken over by the Russian Navy, where they tell us that an earlier wooden church sat on the exact same site. And then we have the other palace that we just saw. And remember, all of these buildings, they're all right next to each other. This is the Trinity Cathedral, where let's just close this episode off properly. Let's show the world that the lie is over. It's game over for the mainstream narrative. And there is no going back. We will all never forget this. The more and more people that see the lies, the faster the truth is going to be shown to us, where we are told that the Trinity Cathedral was constructed in 1828 to 1835, and in 2006, the blaze apparently started on scaffolding on the outside of the church, which was undergoing restoration. And we all know that restoration really means destruction. Now in Columbus, Ohio, we are given one of the most important narratives to this point, to our research, in my opinion. We have the Pontifical College, Josephinum, where Joseph comes over to the USA from Germany in 1867. 3 years later, he becomes a priest and has his own church within a few months. And he gets to buy the house next door, of course, to support 12 orphans. And do we all know about the orphans at this point? Possibly a repopulation tactic that was going on in the 1800s. It's very interesting. Was it only 12 orphans? Or was this one of the places that they would send the orphans through to get them into society? Because who would ever question Joseph the priest from the 1800s? You know, the guy that just randomly shows up from Germany, has all the money ready to buy houses somehow, to support orphans. It all checks out, of course. Simple stuff for Joseph. This was known as the St. Joseph Orphan Asylum. It grew so rapidly, for some weird and of course very random reason, that 5 years after it began, Joseph moved the operation closer to the railroad, which is how these individuals would be dispersed throughout the country. So this is a paragraph of admission. We are being told, down to the smallest detail, how this operation worked. It would go through churches. They would bring a manager type over from Europe, call them a priest, give them a house, give them the resources to run these operations, purchasing new buildings with ease to run the program. So not only do you have the world's fairs that were a repopulation tactic, you had these orphan trains and orphan hubs where they would be dropped off and planted into society. The new facility that Joseph was just finding and saying was his. I want to make that clear, he wasn't building anything. He was given these buildings that were already there from the previous civilization. So the new building gave the orphans a training in the trades. So this Joseph guy was obviously sent with a purpose, to repopulate and teach to a brand new society, one that didn't have any skills. This right here is how you reset a society's technology level. The teacher is never in charge of what the students learn. This Joseph character is a teacher of a class. He is not the principal of the school. There are many schools. He is clearly taking direction as to what the students of the new society will learn. There were many classes like this one all over the country, happening simultaneously. This was an operation. This went on for 12 years with zero backstory. Finds the Collegium Josephinum, this massive college, is just found and ready to roll. No clue where the money came from. No mention of how many men were needed to build this place. Just found it. And its first class of 23 men began. It's unbelievable. This is one of the most important stories to our research, in my opinion, because it shows exactly how the operation took place. It's actually laying it all out there and shows us exactly how they repopulated these regions in the USA. It shows us the operation with the orphans, the teaching programs. And this was our base for our technological knowledge. Whoever controlled this operation from the top has all of the technology from the previous civilization and is controlling what technology we get to have. And they've clearly been doing this for a very long time. And for anyone that's on the fence, we have the St. Vincent's Infant Asylum, located in Baltimore, where we have tunnels under the ground. This infant asylum was in use in the mid-1800s, during the same time period as German transferred Joseph. And what do you know? In the early 1900s, the operation was done, and they declined new orphans. 1941, they changed this to apartments. And in 2015, they light it up and try to destroy it with a fire, but they fail. So 3 years later, what do you think happens? 2018, the building was illegally demolished without a permit. You literally can't make this stuff up. It gets more and more obvious. If you're still on the fence, let's go even deeper. We have the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum, located in Galveston, Texas, where they tell us that this one is haunted. Now, I've talked about hauntings before briefly. I'm not going to say that there aren't any hauntings, but when it comes to these old world buildings, I think it was a tactic to keep people away from them. Just say that they're haunted, and it scares everyone away from investigating. So we have yet again another orphan operation going on in the mid-1800s. And I'm just going to let you know that this is going on and on and on. There were so many orphan operations going on in the mid-1800s because this was how they were repopulating these cities. So where were all these kids' parents? Is this where a lot of our families originated from? Is this why the family trees in the USA almost all end around the same time period? We are told hundreds of fire stories through the first 52 episodes. We know that that is the key and the nod, that it's a building that was constructed by the previous civilization. The St. Mary's Orphan Asylum. For anyone wondering where the parents of these orphans were, you might want to check the other asylum, the Insane Asylum, because they were not going along with the reset. Here's a graph showing that the insane asylums are disappearing over time. And I wonder why. Good thing they cared so much about us in 1955 and 1965, because surely that was the fix. And then a fire had devastated the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum in 1875. If anyone is still on the fence, there is room over here to get off the fence. And honestly, who would want to sit on top of a fence anyway? So we have Ohio, Baltimore, Texas. We have all these towns and cities being repopulated. Brand new people, brand new social structures, brand new mindsets, and resetting what people are taught. This all happened around 150 years ago. So this is all very new. This isn't thousands of years ago. Then we have another very interesting aspect of this in Germany during the same exact time period. And remember, we also have good old Joseph from earlier, also from Germany. So here we are given the Kinder Beware install. And if I pronounce that wrong, I hope you all understand. This is where we are given kindergarten, another tactic to teach children the brand new social structures. What better way to trick people? Take them out of their family's home and tell them what to think, and then test them on it. Failing the test will then lower your self-esteem, putting a social pressure on children to agree with this new way of taught, or they will be called dumb and get an F. This is an operation. It's all connected, and it's designed to enslave the world's population. Year after year, we are all taught a false narrative. We've all been brainwashed into thinking that you are either smart or dumb based on a curriculum that holds zero value in the real world. Now, who knows if this Frederick Froebel was even a real character, but they do admit that kindergarten starts in Germany around the exact same time period that we're talking about, the mid-1800s. So I wanted to tie it all in with the rest of the world. This is a worldwide operation. This is not just the USA. We have a lot of things in the USA being controlled through Germany during this time period, especially the education aspect of it. And I want to point out that yes, we have borders and division now. We have so many countries in the world, and everyone is separated. And you're unable to travel to other lands unless you have a piece of paper that is registered and checked at the checkpoints. But who's to say that there even was a border in the previous civilization? Were there so-called elected leaders controlling everyone, deciding what we can and cannot do? Could they have had a truly free life where they were able to travel wherever they want freely and not feel like they're invading someone else's territory? I would say, in my opinion, this was the world that was here before the reset. And something happened where this past civilization was wiped out and their technology was stolen by a group. And some of it is now being sold back to us strategically. The good stuff is kept to control the masses and used for their benefit. Here we have the St. Joseph's Orphanage, located in Vermont. And if you want to know where they get these horror movies, where they show a nun doing crazy things, there's a dark truth to it. These movies don't come out of nowhere. They come from the last 150 years. Here in Vermont, in the mid-1800s again, thousands of children came through its doors. If you want to demoralize, control, and manipulate a new population, make them completely forget their past and never question what they're told, you would make them suffer. You would take them from their families, and you would ruin their mind at a young age. We have more than 5 million American children passing through the orphanage system in the 1900s alone, hitting its peak in the early 1900s. So it began in the mid-1800s and really ramped up to populate these cities. The American orphanage system included more than 1,600 institutions, partly supported by public funding, but usually run by religious orders, exactly like we talked about in the beginning of this episode. So I think we have now a very solid understanding how the USA was repopulated, how this operation took place, and exactly when it took place. I think that we now have factual evidence as to when this reset really happened. And I think that every episode that is released makes episode 10 and 38 stronger and stronger, giving us more and more proof to our true history.